Hey y'all, welcome back to the Literary Apothecary. My name is Kate and today I'm bringing you round 2 of my Battle of the Books 2025 edition. If you're not familiar with this, check out my first video on this, which I will link in the description below. But basically I put all of the books with some exceptions that I read in the past year into a random bracket generator and I shuffle it around a bit so it's really random. I don't do hardly any homework before I film these videos, and essentially 2 books go up against each other for each match and I choose one to move on to the next round. The little bit of homework that I have done for this video to try to make it easier on myself is I wrote down the authors and also the series and book number in that series. Those are 2 things that I often have trouble remembering while I'm filming, so I'm just trying to make things easier on myself. But other than that, I have not thought about these matchups at all. I barely paid attention to which books matched up to which, and so this will still be completely surprising. I'm just gonna jump in because we have a ton. This is gonna be a long video, but I am so excited. First matchup, we have The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins matched up against Finding Me by Viola Davis. So Library at Mount Char was a fantasy, I want to say sci-fi also book. It was completely wild and unlike anything I had ever read. It was a book that was not an easy read. You had to pay attention to the prose Scott Hawkins was giving you. You had to pay attention to the characters, the actions, the dialogue, everything going on. Led you to the end, but it took a lot of concentration. Finding Me by Viola Davis was, of course, Viola Davis's memoir that completely shook me. I read this basically a year ago. I think it was in January or February of 2025 when I first read this book, and it just, like I said, completely shook me. I was not expecting that at all. I recommend that book every time someone asks for memoirs or audiobooks recommendations. I recommend Finding Me, so Finding Me definitely has to move on in this round. The next matchup is Ready to Reach by Inglaith Cooper, which is book 1 in the Nashville series, versus A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martin, which is, I can never pronounce this series name correctly, Texicalin book 1. I know I completely butchered that, but if anyone has phonetic suggestions on how to pronounce that, I will be looking for that in the comments. Anyways, our matchup. So Ready to Reach is a book that I learned about what new adult series is. I had no idea that this was like a subgenre. I know of young adults and children and, you know, middle grade, but I had never heard of this new adult. And supposedly it's supposed to be for just past the kind of YA age, but not quite into your adult romance age. And it felt a little bit naive to me, even given this new age range. A Memory Called Empire was just completely different than anything I had read. I know I'm going to say that a lot here. I read some very unique books last year. This was a science fiction book, and I did an immersion read with this book. The audiobook really helped me get through this at first, and then I was just completely hooked. So in this one, I'm moving on A Memory Called Empire to round 2. Our next matchup is 2 books that I listened to on audiobook. Inside Out and Back Again, this is by Tahani Lai and is book 1 in that same named series, versus In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. Now, both of these books I liked, but I didn't love. Inside Out and Back Again was supposed to be a children's book, and it was supposed to be from the children's point of view. For the most part, the author stuck to that children's point of view, but there were times where it felt like her adult point of view was coming into play. In the Dream House was this very unique poetic memoir with horror elements and LGBTQ themes, and it was Very, very different. And I'm going to give this round to In a Dream House because that one had me thinking a lot more than Inside Out and Back Again. And I love books that leave me thinking. Next up, we have Asunder by Kirsten Hall, which, again, another completely very, very different book than anything I had ever read, versus Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson. So we have a fantasy, horror, kind of sci-fi book versus a biography of a legend. This one I'm going to give to Asunder because this was recommended to me by Esme, and y'all, this book you have to pick up. It is so wild, and I was thinking about this book for such a long time after, like months after. I still think about this book, and I read this early of 2025. So this round is going to go to Asunder. Next matchup, we have The Rave by J.R. Trouse. This is book 1 in the Elfrayr trilogy versus Winds of Strife by Yuri Gutman. This is book 1 in the Dawnless Night series. These are two fantasy books. Book 1s in the series came to me from authors and BookTube. I think I had a lot more hype for Winds of Strife, and it kind of fell from that hype for me. I still really enjoyed it, but not as much as the hype told me I was going to. And The Rave was, again, very different. It was still your typical fantasy. I think it was YA fantasy. This young girl was going to fight these monsters, and I just loved the fact that J.R. Trouse felt confident enough to write from the point of view of a young adult woman, and I think he did a great job of capturing her personality at that time. So I'm going to give this one to The Rave. Our next matchup is, again, 2 audiobooks. Last year was like the year of audiobooks for me. I need to gather some stats and do a video on that. But we have Grits in the Graveyard by J.L. Collins, trying to read my own handwriting here, which is book 1 in the Witch Hazel Lane Mysteries series versus Monsters and How to Tame Them by Kevin Hart. This round is definitely going to Monsters and How to Tame Them by Kevin Hart. Grits in the Graveyard was a cozy mystery. It did what it was essentially supposed to do. It was cozy, it was mystery, there was mystery to solve, there was cute characters, but it wasn't anything more than that. Monsters and How to Tame Them completely blew me away, which is surprising, especially it being a Kevin Hart book. I didn't expect it to be as heartfelt as it was and to make me think as much as it did. It basically took these traits that we all have in us, called them monsters, things like putting ourselves first or putting ourselves last, our competitive edge, always having to have control over things, those kinds of things. Kevin Hart took those, called them monsters, and told us these aren't necessarily bad, but we have to control how much they take over ourselves and how we react to them in other people. And he just really had me and John, this was a buddy read with John, he just had us really think about our own lives and our own monsters and how we can better control them. Next up, we have Changes by Jim Butcher, which is book 12 in the Dresden Files series, versus The Lotus Eaters by Tatiana Soli. So, The Lotus Eaters was a historical fiction book that took place during the Vietnam War, and it really rocked me. It was really, really well written. I really, really enjoyed it as much as you can enjoy a book taking place at the end of the Vietnam War. You saw the soldiers evacuating, you saw everyone trying to get out before the bombs hit, and it was just really, really well done. It hit your emotions, it hit your nerves, but putting up against Changes is not really the Lotus Eaters went up against almost any other book on this list, it probably would have moved on. But Changes is so far my favorite book in the Dresden Files series, and that book had me crying, had me laughing, it had me wondering, what the hell did I just read, and what am I going to read next in this series? And it was just so different than any other book in the series I had read up to that point. And there were, you know, real life consequences for actions in this book, and that was kind of lacking in the first 11 books of this series, if I'm being honest. There were some that were there, but not to this extent. So this round goes to Changes by Jim Butcher. Some of these are getting really hard. Next matchup, we have Breath of the Dragon by, this is a duo author by Fonda Lee and Shannon Lee, who is the daughter of Bruce Lee. This is book 1 in the Breath Marked. I think this is a duology. Up against Life of Pi by Jan Martel. Now, this round goes to Breath of the Dragon because this was a YA fantasy book that brought in Bruce Lee's martial arts theories and style into this fantasy world, and these two worlds just melded perfectly together. So I'm giving this round to Breath of the Dragon, and I can't wait to read the second book. Our next matchup is, this one is a hard one because both books kind of felt mid to me. My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, and this is, I'm going to butcher this Italian, in book 1 in the series La Amica Gentile, versus Stamped Out by Tanya Kappas. This is book 1 in the Mail Carrier Cozy series, another one of my cozy mysteries that I listened to on audiobook. This one I think I'm going to give the slight edge to My Brilliant Friend, which I enjoyed more than Stamped Out. My Brilliant Friend was an interesting read to me because it came very highly recommended by a couple friends, and there were some really, really high points for me, and there were some points that just felt like they were in the middle and almost hard to follow for me. I also listened to that one via audiobook, and that might have been why it was hard to follow at times just on audiobook, but this round I'm going to give to My Brilliant Friend. Our next matchup is, this is another tough one. Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera versus Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinneman, which is book 1 in the same named series. So we have a thriller that was completely thrilling for me versus a lit RPG fun fantasy that I listened to via audiobook. Now, I will say, if I read just the print version of Listen for the Lie and didn't add in the audiobook for that, this would easily have gone to Dungeon Crawler Carl. Once I added the audiobook and made it an immersion read though, that book completely changed for me. I give props to the narrator, who I didn't write down, but she did an amazing job narrating this book. It really drew me in and kept my interest until the very, very end. So this one might be surprising to some, but I'm actually going to give this one to Listen for the Lie because I was completely entertained by Dungeon Crawler Carl, and I was surprised by how much I liked it, but that was kind of where the surprise ended for me. Our narrator did an absolute wonderful job. He did all these different voices. But I have to give this one to Listen for the Lie because that one just shook me at the end. Next up, we have Witchcraft for the Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix versus Humane Killer by Diana Gabaldon and her son, Sam Sykes. This one easily goes to Witchcraft for the Wayward Girls, and I know some of y'all who know my love for Diana Gabaldon are gonna be shocked by this, but Humane Killer was not an Outlander book, and it was very evident. It had reminiscence of the Outlander books, especially particular scenes where witches are being hunted down, but it wasn't the same. It just was not the same. Witchcraft for the Wayward Girls was so good. It was one of my favorite books of last year. If I had to not do this and just name some of my favorite books, that one would sure be on that list. So I'm going to move that one on to round 3. Our next matchup is Cappuccinos, Cupcakes, and a Corpse by Harper Lynn. This is book 1 in the Cape Bay Cafe series, another cozy mystery, versus Bare-Arsed Banditti, The Men of the 45 by Maggie Craig. So Cappuccinos, Cupcakes, and a Corpse is, if you can't tell, another cozy mystery I listened to an audiobook. Bare-Arsed Banditti is a historical nonfiction book that I read. I was sent to it by my friend Kate along with the women's version, which we'll hear about in a little bit in another matchup. It's about the 45 uprising in the Scottish Highlands against the British and some of the figures that we don't always hear about in history. This one I'm going to give to Bare-Arsed Banditti, which was, I'm calling it a John pick because he, towards the end of 2025, he made his picks, which are now just kind of continuous, running from the oldest books that I've owned that I haven't read yet to the newest. So we're starting with the very first ones that I've gotten as I started this collection to the newest ones, and this came up on there. So this is a John pick, as well as some other books on here that have made it on the list, like Monsters and How to Tame Them. That was a John pick. Anyways, back to this matchup. This one I'm giving to Bare-Arsed Banditti because I love learning about the 45 uprising, and this just shed light on some people that don't always get mentioned. 45 uprising, you always hear about Bonnie Prince Charlie and I can't even think of her name now, Flora MacDonald, and you know, the Highland clans, as if they are just one general body. But this broke it down, and it even showed some men from the British side, some of the redcoats, which I felt like was really respectful. Our next matchup is A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin, which is book 1 in the Earthsea cycle series, versus Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. Now, Sister Outsider just didn't work for me the way I wanted it to. Part of it might have been the narrator of the audiobook I was listening to. She didn't read with a cadence that I usually associate to poetry. This is a mixture of poetry and essays, and it just felt like it needed a better narrator for such a large figure as Audre Lorde. A Wizard of Earthsea was recommended to me all the time by K Fox, and finally I got around to it, and I was not sorry that I did. It was so good. I can't wait to continue that series. So this round goes to A Wizard of Earthsea by far. Moving on to page 2 of our matchups. We have like 2.5 pages left. I told you this is going to be a long one. Next matchup is The Grey Bastards by Jonathan French. This is the book 1 in the Lotland series, versus Only Grave Will Do by James Lloyd Doolin, which is book 3 and the final book in the Malatu trilogy. This one I'm giving to Only Grave Will Do. I really enjoyed The Grey Bastards, and I am going to continue that series at one point, but this final book in this trilogy by James Lloyd Doolin completely rocked me. The writing was beautiful. The story came to such a heartbreaking and beautiful ending. It was perfect for this series. James Lloyd Doolin's character development was just so on point. I can't recommend it enough. Next up, we have Citizen by Claudia Rankin versus Turncoat by Jim Butcher, which is book 11 in the Dresden series, so the book right before Changes. As you can see, I've been making my way through some series and getting through some newer books. So Citizen is a nonfiction kind of social justice book written by a social justice scholar, I want to say. And it's one of those books that I'm glad I read, but I didn't feel like I was exactly the target audience for it. It's one of those books where the real target audience that this author wants is not going to be the audience that actually reads this book. It's the, the target audience that she needs are those racist, those ignorant people that continue the racist ways. And they're so stuck in their ways that they're not going to read this book. So I enjoyed it and I'm glad I read it. But I wasn't the target audience, so it didn't hit me the way I hoped it would. Turncoat by Jim Butcher. I love this series. These books get better as they go on and crazier as they go on. So I'm going to give this round to Turncoat. Next up, we have Damn Rebel Bitches, The Women of the 45 by Maggie Craig versus The Mystery Guest by Nita Prose, which is book 2 in the Molly the Maid series. Okay, this one. So Damn Rebel Bitches was the female version of the book that I was talking about the 45s when we talked about Bare-Arsed Bandittis. And usually when you hear about women of the 45 uprising, you always hear about Flora MacDonald, but no other women. And there were so many women involved on the front lines, involved in the nursing and doctoring of injured soldiers, of the wives supporting their husbands in the 45, wives that are supporters of the 45s, or their husbands were redcoat supporters. There were so many different variations that I learned so much reading this book. I think I learned more reading Damn Rebel Bitches than I did reading Bare-Arsed Banditti. The Mystery Guest, of course, is book 2 in our Molly the Maid series, and I love Molly the Maid. I love that series so much. It's so endearing to me. But this one I have to give to Damn Rebel Bitches because that book was so well done. Maggie Craig's 2 books were just so well done. If you want to know more about the 45 uprising and Scottish history, highly recommend those books. Which reminds me, all of these books will be listed down in the description below with links on where you can find them if they are interesting to you. Our next matchup is An Elderly Lady is Up to No Good by Helen Thurston, which was a translation, versus Life, the Universe, and Everything by Douglas Adams. This is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, number 3. For me, this one goes to Life, the Universe, and Everything. Well, our elderly lady in An Elderly Lady is Up to No Good short stories collection was really hilarious. She was sketch. She was up to some serious things and hiding some pretty serious crimes. And because it was kind of written in a cozy mystery feel, they didn't feel as serious, but they really were, like, hiding deaths and murders and shit. That didn't sit right with me, so I'm going to give this one to Life, the Universe, and Everything. Our next matchup is Tyrant's Throne by Sebastian de Castiel, which is the final book, book 4 in the Great Coat series, versus I Give You My Body, How I Write Sex Scenes by Diana Gabaldon. That was an audiobook I listened to, and that was a weird one to listen to. I really appreciated her insights, and I thought that some of the things that she said could be used not only in writing sex scenes, but just in writing dialogue and interactions between 2 characters in general. There were some really poignant things that she wrote in there. Tyrant's Throne was kind of a letdown for me. After book 2, I absolutely loved. Book 3 was great. No, the other way around. Book 2 was good. Book 3 was incredible, which made book 4 a little bit of a letdown for me. But, so I think I'm actually, when I first started talking about these 2 books, I was going to give it to Tyrant's Throne. But I think I'm going to give this one to I Give You My Body because that one just had some really great writing tips that you could use throughout all of writing and not just in sex scenes. Even though it was marketed as how to write sex scenes, I think there's some bits in there that you could use throughout all fiction writing. Next up is The Unwilling by Kelly Braffett, which is book 1 in the Barrier Lands series, versus Ship of Destiny. I know Robin Hobb fans were waiting for these books to come up. This is book 3 in the Live Ship Traders series. Now, Live Ship Traders trilogy got over with me so much more than the Farseer trilogy. I think book 2, which is coming up in our next matchup, was my favorite in that trilogy. The Unwilling was good writing. There was some minor execution problems, I felt like, but there was this unique idea that this character is a foundling and she is essentially emotionally and sensationally matched up with another character, and they can feel what each other are feeling, whether it's emotions or physical sensations. One character will get beaten and the other one will feel it, but they don't get the wounds that the other one does, and they can heal faster. And it was just such an interesting idea that I think I'm going to give this one to the Unwilling. Our next matchup, I mentioned Mad Ship, which is book 2 in the Life Ship Traders trilogy by Robin Hobb versus Outer Dark by Cormac McCarthy. Outer Dark was a very weird book for me. I think I ended up giving it 3 or 4 stars. It was good. Cormac McCarthy generally has good books, although don't ask me about The Orchard Keeper. But I'm going to give this one to Mad Ship because that book was my favorite Robin Hobb book I've read so far. And it is closest to all the hype that I've been hearing about Robin Hobb for me. Not quite yet with the hype, but the closest I've had. So this one goes to Mad Ship. Ooh, this one's going to be tough. Okay, so our next matchup is Blood of the Mantis by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which is book 3 in Shadows of the App series, versus The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux, which was classic, of course, and a John pick, and I love my word cloud edition of it. This is hard because Blood of the Mantis really took focus for me. Adrian Tchaikovsky's writing always takes a lot of focus for me, and I didn't always have it when I was reading this book last year. Phantom of the Opera, I kind of knew sort of what to expect, although it was at times very different than I expected, and I feel like works better in the musical production of it. I was missing that musical feel of it, even though it takes place in a theater and all of this in the opera. It just missed that operatic feeling of it. So which one am I going to pass on? I would say I'm going to pass on The Phantom of the Opera to the next round because when I'm thinking about these two books, that is a book that I would want to read again versus Blood of the Mantis. Those books are very unique. I love the idea of using a different kind of magic system, but my brain can't take reading that book a second time. So this round will go to Phantom of the Opera. Our next matchup is Dread Nation by Justina Ireland, which is book 1 in the series by the same name, versus The Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sengu Mandana. Dread Nation was kind of a post-apocalyptic Civil War era type book, and I really don't have the words to describe it. I really enjoyed it and I want to continue the series. I just don't know exactly how to describe it. First, and The Secret Society of Irregular Witches was a cozy fantasy. We got these young witches that are in danger and need to learn how to control their magic. We have another young witch who's been taken into this house to teach these young witches, and I just really enjoyed the coziness of that. So I think I'm going to give this one to Varys' Secret Society of Irregular Witches, as hard as that title is to say fast. Our next matchup is Mostly Harmless by Douglas Adams. This is book 5 in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series versus Burning Girls by Veronica Shanos. Now, normally when I was thinking about Burning Girls, I thought almost any book going against this would probably win and go on to the next round because Burning Girls was a short story collection based on Jewish folklore stories, and it was interesting, but I don't know, it just fell flat for me a little bit. But considering it's going up against Mostly Harmless, which I still liked, but I thought was completely unneeded in this series. I felt like book 4 in the Hitchhiker's Guide really, I think it's called So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. Yeah, that's coming up in a couple matches. mostly Harmless just felt unneeded to finish the series. So I'm going to give this one to Burning Girls, and so I can talk about that one a little bit more when my head's in a better place to talk about it. Our next matchup is James by Percival Everett versus The Decision by Kevin Hart. Now this one is a tough one because The Decision was kind of like part of monsters and how to tame them boiled down into one kind of novella-length nonfiction. It's like he took one of the monsters and just wrote about that one. James was essentially the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, but in a more adult writing tone and from the slave Jim's point of view, and I really enjoyed that one, and I have a review coming for that very soon. So I'm going to give this one to James by Percival Everett, especially since Monsters has already moved on, so that'd be kind of like two of the same book moving on. Next up we have So Long and Thanks for All the Fish by Douglas Adams, book number 4 in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, versus Credible Threats by Daniel Meyer, book 1 in the Sam Adams series. I really enjoyed Credible Threats, and I love Patrick Swayze, but So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, as I just said in a couple matchups before this, felt to me like the perfect ending to that series, and so I'm going to give this one to So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. We only have a couple more matchups left, so bear with me. Next up, we have a matchup of 2 Greatcoats books, actually. We have Night's Shadow, which is Greatcoats number 2, and Saint's Blood, which was Greatcoats number 3 by Sebastian de Castell. And if I'm remembering this correctly, and I think I am, this one goes to Saint's Blood hands down. There was one book in that series, and I think it was book 3. I hope so at this point, now that I'm saying it out loud in front of y'all, that just stood out so far for me from the rest of the books in this series. So I'm going to give this one to Saint's Blood and hope that it was that one and not the other one. I feel like Night's Shadow was fine, but wasn't I liked books 1 and book 3 more than Night's Shadow. Next up, we have The Paper Magician by Charlie N. Holmberg versus Curse of the Mistwraith by Janny Wirtz, which is book 1 in the Wars of Light and Shadow series. This one I'm giving to Janny Wirtz because her writing is so beautiful and so detailed and just takes you straight into the story. You are experiencing that story along with the characters. So I'm going to give this one to that. Curse of the Mistwraith. Just a couple more matchups left. Birds Are Not for the Cat by J.R. Trouse and Silas Jackson versus At the Water's Edge by Sarah Gruen. Birds Are Not for the Cat was such a weird book. I don't even have the words to describe it. Just go and check it out if you want something completely different and weird and will leave you saying, what the heck did I just read? At the Water's Edge was a historical fiction book that takes place in Scotland during World War II, I think, or shortly after. We still have bombings or threats of bombing, so I think it's during World War II. This book caught me off guard. I thought this was going to be a typical historical fiction book with some romance and some adventure in it, and it was really soul-searching for our main character, and I did not expect to feel as much as I did in this. So this round definitely goes to At the Water's Edge. Next up, we have The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams, which is book 1 in the Winnowing Flame series, versus Orphan Train Escape by Rachel Wesson, which is Heart on the Rails, book 1. Now, Orphan Train Escape was fine. It was kind of a YA book. There were parts that felt a little bit messy to me and needed a little bit more guidance, but The Ninth Reign reigns supreme. That book was so well written. There was no messy parts in that aside from the actually messy parts. No messy writing, just superb writing from page 1 to the end. Can't wait to continue in that series. The Ninth Reign moves on to round 3. And then our last matchup for this round is Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb, which is Live Ship Traders book number 1, versus The October Country by Ray Bradbury, which was a short story collection that I didn't know was a short story collection until I started it. And that was kind of a horror science fiction collection, and there was some really wacky stuff in that collection. This one I'm going to give to Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb, because that one made me see like, oh, okay, not all of these books are going to make me feel the way that Farseer trilogies did. And it kind of encouraged me to continue in the realm of the Elderlings universe. So this round I'm going to give to Ship of Magic. We have 2 books that get automatic bids to the next round, because when I was writing out these matchups, I did not realize that some of these books were novella length. So the books that they went up against, I'm automatically moving on to 3. That includes Ghost Story by Jim Butcher, which is Dresden Files number 13, and The Winter Night by Bernard Cornwell, which is book 1 in the Warlord Chronicle series. Now that I'm looking at my notes that I crossed off for novellas, I take back what I said about The Decision being a novella length book, because of course it wouldn't be included in this if it was. I still remain with my decision to move, ironically, James by Percival Everett on instead of The Decision by Kevin Hart. But I just wanted to go back and correct myself on that, saying that this was a full-length book, but I think I want to move James on still instead of that. So that was my round 2 version of Books of the Battle of the Books 2025 edition. As you can see, I'm still getting back into the hang of all of this, so words are hard right now, and I'm using a new editor for these next couple videos because we switched my operating system on my computer, and my other old editor no longer worked there. So bear with my editing also, because it might be a little rough. But as always, let me know what decisions in this round was surprising to you. Which ones did you agree with? Which ones didn't you agree with? Give me all your thoughts in the comments below. As always, keep reading, and I love you all to the moon and back. Bye.